Let's talk handouts.
This video is brought to you by EpiPies Academy.
I think it's really important to have a handout when you do a webinar, not just because you want them to have your slides, but because a handout can be key to getting people to interact during the webinar. You're going to see when you start doing webinars that you'll probably have 10 to 15% of your audience that will talk back and forth, ask questions, and the rest of them you're going to kind of wonder if they're alive. The handout is a great way to get them to interact with you if they're more introverted and are somewhat afraid to talk in front of a big group of people or make comments, because a lot of people are afraid to do that in front of a large webinar. I can have 100 or more people in my webinars, and asking someone to speak in front of a group that large or to make a comment in front of a group that large can be intimidating. So the handout is key. This is a handout from my quickest route to your first job in development webinar. And early on in the webinar, I have a slide about setting goals. I will physically ask them to fill in the blanks with a pen or pencil or with their word processor during the webinar. So I'll say something like, let's all take a moment to fill this out so we can become clear on our own goals. If you are looking for a career or a job in development, then let's fill out the blanks in this first sentence. If you're looking to be a freelancer, then let's fill in the blanks in the second sentence. Now, what I'm trying to do with this is get them to visualize success, visualize the end point of the webinar, or the promise of the webinar. I would like to have obtained my first freelance client in blank number of months, earning a minimum of blank per hour. Visualize what the successful outcome is. And again, I could ask them to do that verbally or to do that in the webinar chat or do it on their own, but having it in the handout, again, gives them a way to interact with you. I introduce a section on myths by asking them, what are the biggest myths you've heard about becoming a developer? So obviously you couldn't just lift these items off for your own handout because they need to be relevant to your topic for your webinars, but you can see what we're trying to do here is get them to interact. I might have them circle the tech skills they're most interested in or the secondary skills they need to learn. And then at the end, I always provide a larger checklist that provides all of the steps that they need to reach the goal that the webinar promises. So here, these are all the steps they would need to get their first job in development. Keep it very simple, give them a checklist with the date completed, but it does enhance the value of the webinar because it gives them a leave behind they can reference that's got the information from the webinar. And then you might want to include some key slides. I included the roadmap that's featured in this webinar as well. Other information you're going to want on your handout is obviously your logo if you have one, contact information, your website. So if they have the handout later but they don't remember where it's from, they have a way to go back to your website, a way to contact you, or a way to re-engage with the content that you provided if they find this months or a year down the road. So make sure you always have a handout for your webinar. Make sure it causes your webinar attendee to interact with you. Actually refer to the handout during the webinar itself. And you can have them download the handout first during the webinar or send it out via email as you're preparing to get them into the webinar, maybe with your email that reminds them the webinar starts in just a few minutes. And you can use the handout after the webinar as well in your emails to refer back to it for main points that you meant. But a handout is a key element to a successful webinar. When it comes to format, we generally give the users a PDF and then ask them to print it out before the webinar starts. So this way it's easy for them to write answers into the actual document. PDF is a pretty universal format. You might want to have a Word copy or a text copy handy for someone who emails you and complains that they can't open the PDF. But generally PDF is the most universal format, and we do like them to physically print a copy before the webinar starts.